Today marks the end of an era for a project that's been going on for 5 years. Back in 2020, I swapped a Junkyard 8.1 into the ugly truck, I turbocharged it, and then proceeded to beat the snot out of it over the course of the next 5 years. And the engine never complained once until we installed some higher flowing cylinder heads, bumped the compression, installed a bigger turbocharger, and basically blew the motor up in the course of 1 day. Woo-hoo! Hold on to it. But today we are going to totally change the direction of the ugly truck. We're going to end the junkyard era and we're going to install a fully built race engine into the ugly truck. But the only problem is I don't have an engine here at the shop. Now, I found a killer deal on an engine and we are on our way. The only stipulation was that we have to pull it out ourselves. I'll show you a little bit more about it in just a second, but this engine should have way more potential than the stock bottom end 8.1 that is currently blown up in the ugly truck. So let's go get ourselves another big block. So yeah, it's me. I'm the guy that has the really good deal on an engine that's built and ready to go. And I was thinking about this the other night. And it reminded me of back when I was in school in an economics 101 class, and they talked about this term, marginal utility per dollar spent. And it was kind of floating around in the back of my brain. And we've spent a ton of dollars on this engine, and we have gotten exactly zero utility from it because we built the engine, but the stock 8.1 was running so good. The project kind of evolved into the truck that you see behind me, its very own dedicated build. But with only 30 days left to go until race week begins, I don't have time to build a whole fresh engine, and I don't want to go get another junkyard engine just because with the different heads and the higher compression, the big turbo, it's not going to last. So I don't want to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. That would be just stupid or insane. So anyway, yeah, we've got ourselves a 535 cubic inch big block. We're going to yank it out. We'll get it back to the shop, and I'll go over some of the details with you in a little bit. And don't get me wrong, this does not mean that the four-wheel drive drag truck is going to get canceled. We have a ton of money in the rest of the chassis and the frame and the suspension and the axle and the fuel tank and the coilovers and oh my goodness, the list goes on and on. So we're still going to find a way to make use of those dollars spent, but for now, we need to grab an engine and stick it in the ugly truck. You know, I remember now why I like working on full-size trucks over S10s. Got so much room under here. I'm glad that happened there, not with the engine up in the air. Now that was a little bit unexpected. Our strap broke, luckily. I mean, the engine dropped a tiny bit, but I don't think it damaged anything. But just last week, we had a coyote in the shop hanging from that thing for a customer project. And I'm very thankful it didn't drop on that. So we'll find a chain or something and we'll get this yanked out. Okay, so the only thing I haven't done on this engine is get the push rods ordered. Now this is a solid roller cam, so we're using these. They're a Crowder Enduro-Max solid lifter. Of course, we have a matching solid roller cam. Got a pretty trick TND rocker arm setup. Everything's set up for solid roller, except we need to know the push rod length. Because it's a solid roller, we got to lash these. So I'll put a feeler gauge in there as I adjust this push rod, but this is like the last piece of the puzzle. Now, worth noting, we already went through and set up the stand heights on the base for the shaft mount rockers. That was quite a bit of work. We got 1/2-inch head studs on this. So the push rods are measured and ordered, and they'll be here in a couple days. And I figured, since most of you guys probably haven't seen the details on this engine, I'll just kind of give you the quick overview of what it is that we have created. Much like the 8.1 that is currently in Ugly Truck, it's still based off a Gen 7 big block Chevy, but this one doesn't have a single factory part inside of it. It's based on a PSI 8.8 block, actually cast by World Products. Has a 4.5-inch stroke forged steel crankshaft. It has Manley rods in it, custom Race Tech pistons. Has a solid roller bullet racing cam with a duration somewhere in the 260-degree range at 50 thousandths lift, like 700 thousandths lift total. So a pretty spicy camshaft. We did spend some money in the valve train to hopefully let this thing rev up a little bit. It's got some T&D shaft mount rockers. It has Crowder Enduro-Max solid roller lifters with a larger 903 body on them. We have some trend push rods that are going to be coming. As far as the induction setup, we have some Raylar aluminum cylinder heads, but they've been extensively modified with larger 1/2-inch head studs. We have larger than stock valves. We have a valve spring package designed to work with a solid roller cam. We have copper head gaskets with a stainless steel O-ring to help seal things up at increased boost pressure. And of course, we're going to top it off with a Raylar Gen 7R intake manifold. And basically, this is the best engine that I could afford, or rather my credit card could have afforded to put together, still based on the Gen 7 architecture. And the final goal for this thing is to be somewhere between 1500 and 1700 horsepower, but we're not going to do that in Ugly Truck right away, because none of the rest of the systems on Ugly Truck, like the turbocharger, the transmission, the rear end, the drive shaft, fuel system, none of those things will withstand that much power. So at first, we'll probably just be between 900 and 1000 horsepower. And then once we figure out what we're going to do with the four-wheel drive drag truck and the Ugly Truck's engines, we'll probably put this one back into the drag truck. But for now, at least this is a good chance to get the engine running, get it tested at a fairly low power level, and actually start to get some utility out of it rather than just letting it sit as a mock-up engine. Now let's go up. You're right there. Straight down. Oh, over here? Yep. Oh, yeah. All right, gonna get this fender liner out of the way for the millionth time. I'm kind of bummed now, James, because we got both trucks broken right now. Got an S10 that needs a transmission, got an Ugly Truck that needs a motor. I think the saddest part about this whole thing is I only put, after we did the top end on the engine, I only put maybe 30 miles, 40 miles on this thing before it let go. Here we are again.
Do you want to swap the engine or leave it again?
Well, for now, I'm swapping in the other engine over there. but I don't know what I want to do with this one yet. I do have a lot of good parts. So we'll probably put this in some other project at some point, or we may rebuild it later and put it back in and take the other engine out, put it in the other truck. I don't know. There's a lot of ideas floating around. Come on, there we go. The big boy. Oh yeah, brand new oil, nice and chunky. Someday we'll tear this thing down and find out what went wrong. Stop falling on me. Got the upgraded engine sling this time. Ain't messing around with that cheap stuff. So we've got the Junkyard 8.1 pulled out, and right now this is kind of like a almost bittersweet moment because it's like the end of an era for the Junkyard version of the ugly truck, or at least the 8.1. And my whole YouTube channel was started with this 8.1 swap and with the premise of how far can we push a Junkyard 8.1, and it's still to me an unanswered question because I feel like the engine failed not because of just overpowering the stock parts, but because of, I think, detonation, which is my fault because if I would have had E85 in there, we probably wouldn't be in this situation in the first place, I think. So in the future, we'll probably revisit the Junkyard motor, but for now, anyway, we have all of the most of the accessories pulled off that we're going to reuse. I mean, the valve covers and coils, I'll yank those off. Intake manifold's going to come off. But for the most part, we have another long block that we are just about ready to stick into the truck. I've got some push rods on the way. I think I mentioned that. They'll be here Monday. Right now, it's actually Friday. And as soon as we get the valve train buttoned up, we'll get the valve covers on, we'll get the engine into the truck, and then it's just a simple matter of reconnecting everything and hear it run. Didn't have the right size balancer installer here, so we had to borrow this one from one of the parts stores. It's definitely a little janky, not a good high quality one, so hopefully this doesn't give us any issues. A little precaution, never hurts to have some oil on the threads. Now, I'm always nervous when I fire up an engine for the first time, but this one I'm going to be especially nervous about, I guess for two reasons. One, because of how much money we've spent on this thing over the years. And two, mainly because we, oh, let's not turn. And two, because I assembled everything so long ago. I'm confident that I like mark things and finish things that are inside the engine, but I'm like, I've forgotten because so much time has gone by. Okay, so the push rods finally showed up and we're about to get them in, but that's tight. But I do need to clearance these guide holes in the shaft mount for this one, and this one. Intake side, this one, there's no guide hole there. I guess that's the exhaust push rod. All right. I also wrote shims, 120 thousandths under intake. Can't tell, it looks like 60 under exhaust. I do not want to lose those. So that little edge of the chamfer right there, we just got to ease it back a little bit. That's the last place where the push rods might hit. What's up? Flashlight?
Yeah,
Like here?
because here on the bar is no race light.
Oh.
I recommend it.
We've got things kind of rolling right along here. Mostly everything that we need from the old long block has been stripped off. We got the valves lashed. I am going to have to do a little bit of adjustment or clearancing on the valve cover spacer just because the nuts, they don't hit, but it becomes very close. And as you can see, as the valve opens, we get more room. But so 4 spots on each side, we just get eased back a little bit, no big deal. We've got the front dress on as much as we're going to do until we get it in the truck. But then I got to thinking, like, we've got this engine over here and there's a lot of good parts still on it. I'm just kind of adding up in my mind, like, okay, there's so many dollars for the cylinder heads, for the rocker arms, for the push rods and camshaft, and there's a fair amount of value there, and also some potential horsepower that we still could put to use in something. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know if I'm going to repurpose it for, maybe it'll end up back in the ugly truck someday as like a stock stroke, high compression, hydraulic roller, you know, and a street motor. I don't know, but I don't want to just throw it away because there's so much potential still there. But let me know what you guys would do with it. I'm up for ideas at this point. But we are at the point now where we're going to put a little bit of oil in this thing. We got a priming tool on there. We're going to build up some oil pressure. And once we verify that, we'll get it sealed up, valve covers and intake, and then it's going home. All right, little special sauce. Help things kind of break in. And a little bit of tractor oil. The Verify oil makes it up top. All right, so I'm going to do something that you're probably going to think is crazy, but it's very important to the long-term life and longevity of this engine. I'm going to take these brand new lifters that cost about $1,400 and I'm going to grind them. I'll tell you why in a second, but trust me, it's important. So why on earth would I cut into a brand new, somewhat expensive solid roller lifter? Well, the answer is simple: to save the lifter and the rest of the valve train. So how is it going to do that? Well, when I was priming the engine over with the pump, you notice that we have a lot of oil up here. Normally that's where you stop. You see oil flowing through the valve train, you're like, great, good to go. But thankfully, I noticed that only the exhaust rockers actually had any oil flow through them. None of the intake rockers had any oil flow. So short version is, I took a bunch of measurements of the oil galley, and it turns out, I'll show you the unmodified backside because you only do one side. It turns out where the lifter sits in the bore, you can see those dotted lines, that's the oil galley.
that oiling hole sat just above the galley, and there was no oil flow on the intake side because these big block lifters, they're canted. One sits at a slightly different angle than the other. The exhaust one, it just barely like covered half the hole, but on the intake side, completely blocked. So obviously we need to have lubrication on the valve train because it would not only burn up the lifters, but it would burn up our T&D shaft mount rockers, which we do not want. So this is actually a recommended modification on a lot of aftermarket blocks with solid rollers. So it seems extreme, but it's necessary. But by installing that little groove that's about 80 thousandths wide, 20 thousandths deep, it's going to let oil flow from this band up into the lifter, which will then lubricate through the push rod and the valve train and so on. And believe it or not, a stock hydraulic roller lifter has something similar. You see that hole, or the big hole that they drilled in there, that does the same thing. It allows oil to flow from the band up into the lifter, pump up the hydraulic lifter through the top. Anyway, these don't work on the block because we have 904 lifters or 903 instead of the smaller, I think those are like 840 something. Anyway, I'm rambling, trying to be brief, but that right there is a crucial modification for the life of our big block.
So right here, we're going to see proof that this crazy modification actually works. We are going to see oil pressure flowing through the intake rocker on the one that we just modified. We haven't done any of the other ones yet, and you'll see that none of the other intake rockers have any oil flow.
And just a short while later, we have all of the lifters modified. I have verified oil flow to all 16 rocker arms, which is thumbs up. We have the oil pump drive in place, the surface is cleaned up, and we are basically ready to install the Gen 7R intake on top of our 535. And this is kind of a view I have been staring at for a while. So I am really ready to get the intake on top of this thing.
How many of y'all double tap the torque wrench? I know you're not supposed to, but I do it. Now, the $1 million question is, will the modified oil pan actually fit? I added a kick out on the other side, adds about a quarter capacity. I know it fits in the four-wheel drive chassis. I don't think I ever bothered to check to see if it fits, so let's find out together. You want to make sure your converter will spin, that way you know nothing's bound up. You know, as much as I'm looking forward to having this thing finally running, it just kind of feels wrong though, starting it up with a single turbo. This was always supposed to be a twin turbo build with this engine. But hey, one turbo is better than no turbos.
So just a little while later, we're kind of back in the same boat that we were when we started today, except now instead of a blown up junkyard engine, we have ourselves a fully built 535 cubic inch Gen 7 solid roller big block sitting pretty, ready to make some horsepower. Now, I don't really know what we're going to do with the other engine. We'll figure that out. But that's a problem for another day because we have race week, which starts in 20 days approximately from today, and we have a lot left to do. Engine-wise, we've actually made pretty good progress. For the most part, it's all kind of wired up and ready to fire, but as you can maybe see, there are no injectors in the engine. That's because I sent the ones that were in here off to Lance at R&D Performance Fab. He is going to flow check them for us and clean them and things like that. They've been in this engine for about 4.5 years, and they have had E85 in them over a couple of winters, so fresh engine, we just want to make sure the injectors are freshened up. Other than that, next time you see it, we pretty much should be starting it up and going on our first test drives and tuning and things like that. The only other things that we need to address before race week are in the rear suspension. I need to adjust the pinion angle because we did a shackle flip on the rear end, and because the truck's now a little bit higher, I need to adjust the shocks, which, speaking of shocks, I actually need to get my shock mounts, which I ordered a while ago and they haven't shown up. So, got to check on that order. Anyhow, that's just all basic stuff that we got to do to help harness the power because, as they say, more power is only the beginning.